What's up, guys, and welcome back to another 40 Facts on the lore of Warhammer 40k. And it'll be 30k in this instance, since we're doing the Primarch of the Dark Angels, Lionel Jonson. So let us begin. Lionel Jonson was cast away to the feudal death world of Caliban by the ruinous powers of chaos. Caliban was infested with monstrous, chaos-warped great beasts, but the humans there were kept safe thanks to the Knights of the Order. The Knights had the technology to produce armor similar to Imperial power armor, as well as firearms and weapons. The Lion was discovered as a feudal child by the Knights of the Order's finest warrior, Sir Luther. He named this child Lionel Jonson, which translates to Lion, Son of the Forest. Jonson quickly adapted to the Knights' customs and became great friends with Luther. The two then began a campaign to rid the world of the great beasts. Within a decade, the world was cleansed and the beasts, and Jonson was awarded the title of the Supreme Grandmaster of the Order, which sparked jealousy within Luther. When the Emperor arrived on Caliban, Jonson was given command of the First Legion. Luther and other members of the Order were given the choice to run the trials to become Space Marines. The younger ones became full-on Astartes, but those deemed too old were genetically modified to increase their abilities. Luther, too old to be a Space Marine, was modified and became Jonson's second in command. All these drastic changes were a bit too much for some of the older Knights of the Order, and they devised a plan to assassinate both Jonson and the Emperor, but were stopped by the Psyker Zariel and the newly formed Dark Angels. During the Dark Angels campaign against the advanced human planet of Sarash, the Sarosi government attempted to assassinate the Lion through the use of an atomic warhead, but ultimately failed. Sarosi agents attempted to summon a demonic incursion, but were again stopped by the combined efforts of the Dark Angels, the Imperial Armory, and the use of a few Titans. The Lion gained much praise for his leadership and combat capabilities, but was viewed as too secretive and too stoic to be appointed War Master. The Emperor chose Horus, and the reaction was mixed among the Primarchs. Jonson and Leman Russ were alike in that they both saw this appointment as Horus being the favorite son to the Emperor. While on Caliban for recruitment, Luther and his lieutenants were faced with a rebellion. The resurgence of monsters was viewed as Jonson's fault, and insurgency began to see this as a betrayal to the Lion. While investigating the rebellion, Luther found out that the emergence of the warp monsters and also undead corpses was due to a cabal of sorcerers. Once he learned of Horus's betrayal, Luther decided that he had had enough of following the Emperor. He declared his independence and his opposition to Jonson and the Imperium. During the Great Crusade, the Dark Angels and Space Wolves assaulted a planet whose ruler had disrespected the Emperor by sacrificing thousands of priests to his patron demon. This ruler also disrespected Leman Russ by calling him the Emperor's lapdog. Russ, in anger, demanded that he make an immediate attack, but was denied by the Emperor. The Dark Angels were given the go-ahead and commenced their attack. The Lion personally beheaded this rebel leader. After the battle was over, Russ stormed into the headquarters to confront L. Jonson. In his anger, Russ struck at Jonson, and the two Primarchs fought for a day and night non-stop until finally Russ began to laugh. He said that the circumstances that started this brawl were too funny, but the Lion was not amused. He then knocked out the great wolf unconscious. When he awoke, Russ swore that he would avenge his honor, and the two legions have since then held honor duels in remembrance of this brawl. While these duels bring respect and strengthens the bonds between the two legions, sometimes the rivalry has ended in hostility, and sometimes even death between the two legions. When the Lion heard of Horus's betrayal, he led a small force to infiltrate the Forge World Diamat and secure several powerful siege weapons that would make taking over Terra easier. The Dark Angels succeeded in defending the Forge World from Horus's warriors, but was deceived by Perturabo into allowing the Iron Warriors to protect these siege weapons. Conrad Kurz, Primarch of the Night Lords, invited L. Jonson to the planet of Sugasta. Here, he tried to convince him to join Horus's cause. During the explanation, Kurz revealed that the Dark Angels were envisioned to have a dark end. Enraged, the Lion struck out at Kurz, but the battle ended with L. Jonson having a throat slashed, and Kurz having a sword stuck in his back. Once he departed from Sugasta, the Lion went to obtain a warp engine of tremendous power that would allow him to coordinate large fleets during a warp jump. On his way to this vessel, the Dark Angels encountered demons, and L. Jonson had no choice but to reinstate librarians into his legion, which was in direct violation of the Council of Nicaea. Nemiel, a fellow Dark Angel, who was also part of Caliban's Order of Knights, was against this reinstatement. He kept on telling the Lion that librarians were against the Emperor's rules. L. Jonson had no choice but to kill his fellow knight and subdue him and any others. They then commenced to battle these demons. During the height of the battle, the Dark Angels Primarch came face to face with Kairos Fateweaver. Fateweaver attempted to turn him to chaos, but upon searching the Lion's heart, he found nothing to sway him with. L. Jonson's loyalty to the Emperor gave him strength, and that strength was enough to push back Fateweaver. He then impaled him through the heart and sent him reeling back into the warp. Now, with the warp engine in hand, the Lion led an ambush against Kurz and his Night Lords. This surprise attack severely injured the Night Lord's Primarch, placing him in a coma. The Night Lords had no choice but to retreat, but the Lion and the Dark Angels did not want them to escape, and so they followed them and eventually caught up and kept the attack going. Once Conrad Kurz came to, he intended to board the Lion's ship. Once inside, he began to carve a trail of death, leading to the lower levels of the ship. Unfortunately for the Night Lords, they took heavy losses, and the captain, Sevatar, was taken prisoner. Every search party that the Lion would send would never return. Finally, the Lion gave in and came to search for Kurz for himself. For the next 16 weeks, Kurz managed to escape the Lion's grasp. Jonson had no choice but to head to Ultramar. Here, he met up with Guilliman and Sanguinius, and due to a ruin storm created by Erebus, he was trapped on this side of the Ultramar. Now, in the company of the two Primarchs, the three of them created the Imperium Secundus. Guilliman refused to crown himself Emperor of the Imperium Secundus, and instead, reluctantly, it fell to Sanguinius. The Lion then became Lord Protector, essentially War Master. They were now ready to lead the Imperium, just in case if Horus had taken over the rest of the galaxy. Kurz managed to sneak away from the barge and began to rampage across the crag. Guilliman and Jonson followed Kurz and attempted to kill him. Kurz, however, had led them into a trap. While fighting inside of a chapel, he detonated charges and brought down the building on both of them. Fortunately, both Guilliman and Jonson survived the attack, but Kurz escaped. During the battle for Terra, Lionel Jonson arrived too late to make an impact in the battle. Although his actions did allow many Marines the reinforcements they desperately needed, he could not sway the battle enough to save the Emperor from becoming interred upon the Golden Throne. Stricken with grief, Jonson returned to his homeworld of Caliban to reinforce his legion and to recover. When his ships arrived in orbit, they were met with salvo after salvo from the planet's artillery. Jonson found out that Luthor, his second-in-command, had fallen to chaos, and had tainted those upon Caliban as well. The lion had no choice but to bombard the planet to rid the world of as much chaos taint as possible before making planetfall. As the world burned, the lion led his forces to wage war against Luther's own forces. They battled inside the Dark Angel's fortress monastery. As Jonson confronted Luthor, he saw that nothing of his former friend had remained. Chaos had completely taken over him, but also they have augmented his strength to that of a Primarch. The two former friends began their epic battle. They leveled the monastery around them as the two laid blow after blow against each other. The Dark Angels continued their planetary bombardment. Unbeknownst to all, the planet was at its limit. The ground began to crack and crumble. Fighting on a dying planet, the two warriors were evenly matched. Blow after blow was matched with cunning strength. Finally, Luthor saw a tiny opening and launched a devastating psychic attack. This attack mortally wounded the lion, and as he lifted his blade to deliver the death blow, Luthor realized what he had done. Seeing his friend's battered body as his home planet died around him snapped him from the cloudy vision of chaos. Luthor fell to his knees, unwilling to fight. The guilt was too much to bear. The gods of chaos realized that they had lost, and therefore sent a warp storm to break apart the planet. The Dark Angel's Primarch carried Luthor inside the monastery, where the force fields protected them from the warp storm. After the assault, all that remained was an asteroid and the monastery. The Dark Angels in orbit descended onto the monastery and searched the ruins for their lion, but found Luthor instead. Luthor kept on mumbling that Jonson had been taken by the Watchers in the Dark, and would one day return and forgive him of his sins. No trace of the lion was ever found. The remaining traitorous Dark Angels managed to escape into the warp, now calling themselves the Fallen. As of the 41st millennium, Lionel Jonson is the only known loyalist Primarch that is still alive. Now, the war gear of this Primarch consisted of the Lion Helm, a sacred piece of war gear that was worn by Jonson himself. Built into this is a protective force field that can be activated even when not being worn. Currently, the Supreme Grandmaster Azrael is in possession of this helm. The Lion Sword was also the personal sword of Lionel Jonson, and was crafted by the Emperor's own armorers. Since the Horus Heresy, this sword has been broken, and is now in the possession of Cypher, who seeks to reforge it and present it to the Emperor in order for his own sins as well as the Fallen to be forgiven. And with that, we are once again at the end of another 40 Facts of the Warhammer Universe video. Let me know what you guys thought about the lion and his travels across the Imperium. Also, let me know what you guys want to hear from next. As always, I have been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I am signing out.